Welcome back, guys. We got a crazy episode of the Nexus event. It is a Loki episode. It's episode 4. If you guys haven't seen it already, back out now. I don't want to spoil anything for you. But if you have seen it already, then I can gladly bring you in on my thoughts, my recap, my reaction, all of that. Before we get into it, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed the video. Also, be sure to check out my articles on Nightcast Media and go follow Nightcast Media at Nightcast Media, as well as you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all that. But let's just get right into it. Pretty crazy stuff going on in the Loki verse here. I guess that's what I'm going to call it. We get a flashback right off the cuff. We get a flashback to Lady Loki, aka Sylvie, as a little girl. We saw this in the trailer. If you guys saw the newest trailer, that's where this kind of derives from. So we get that flashback. She's in Asgard. She's playing like kids do. And the TVA, like the scumbags they actually are, end up kidnapping her, refreshing or resetting her timeline with a time bomb. They kidnap her and actually end up putting her in prison. So they make her a prisoner. And basically, what ends up happening is that she's able to escape. And how is she able to escape? Well, Ravona Renslayer, who actually is in charge of the thing, besides the fact, the timekeepers and whoever is up at the top, more for that later. But she escapes because she beats the crap out of a young Ravona Renslayer by biting her arm and kicking her foot, taking her temp pad, and leaving. That's the last time they see her until, the current timeline. So this is interesting. It kind of shows us the backstory like I expected we would get. We didn't get a ton, but we got enough to understand she's basically been on her own for quite a while now. Now we cut to present day. Ravona is right outside of this door, and the door is to none other than the timekeepers. We've been waiting all this talk about the timekeepers, all this propaganda, but are they real? More of that later. She sees the timekeepers, it cuts out, goes to a title card, and then, of course, after that, we get Mobius talking with Ravona. Ravona explains basically her interaction with the timekeepers, which we don't really get to see, and Mobius has other things on his mind, more like C20. C20, for those of you who don't know, is the agent that Sylvie has at Roxcart. She's the beginning of episode 3, in which you get to see, what is in her mind, what she saw. She's having, drinks at this bar, like all of that. And she's, that is C20, but C20 is an actual person. And of course, we find out that everybody at the TVA is a variant that was reset and was programmed to be a TVA worker. So essentially what ends up happening is that C20 is killed, and Ravona is not shy to explain that. She dies, but Mobius isn't quite understanding of that because he explained she started saying things like, it's real, it's real. While she was rambling on, she was totally fine. So, he doesn't really understand that, but he's starting to suspect some things, and Ravona is not really given the full story. But she's like, yeah, she's dead. She died. She didn't make it. Her brain was scrambled by the variant. Of course, they're blaming everything on the variant. Go figure. But then we move on to Loki with Sylvie, where we last saw them on Lamentis, wondering how in God's green earth are they going to get out of that? What I wasn't really wondering. I just assumed that Mobius would save the day, which in a way he kind of does. But here's what ends up happening is that Loki's with Sylvie. They've kind of admitted defeat here. You're having the end of Lamentis. They're on a planet that's basically dying, and their last-ditch effort to get out of it fell short in episode 3. So what they're doing is they're just sitting there accepting defeat, and they're talking, and, Sylvie's going to mention that, the backstory that we saw at the beginning. She's going to tell Loki that's what happened. She was on Asgard, and TVA took her, all of that. And then as that happens, there's a connection that you kind of saw in episode 3 a little bit. You see a lot more in episode 4, at least at the beginning here. Loki and Sylvie have this connection that looks like they're about to kiss or something. And that is how the TVA finds them, because essentially what that did is it took 2 Lokis to cause a Nexus event in that timeline. So while Lamentus is supposed to die and everything, two Lokis coming together is really the bane of the TVA's existence. I think, honestly, the bane of the TVA's existence might be Loki. But again, more on that later. So this is a very interesting part of this whole story because it spikes the branch. They see the branch. They're able to find the two Loki variants, and they take them back to the TVA. And while they're prisoners and everything, there's more to this story. We do see that they are holding them in separate cells or holding them in separate rooms. We get Loki, who feels like he's been betrayed by Mobius, and Mobius feels like he's been betrayed by Loki. In reality, though, Loki sees things from a broader perspective, and he's actually looking out for everybody in this scenario. Loki's becoming more human in a different arc. We saw this in the MCU movies, but now we're seeing it in a different way in this show. And so it's really interesting because Mobius starts to actually take what he's saying seriously. Now, he's not going to let him know that. He's a little pissed off that he ran out with Lady Loki the last time at Rock's cart and left him. But there's something there. And Mobius is still somewhat stone-headed here, so he's not exactly going to go along with Loki's plans right off the bat, and who could blame him? Loki's stabbed people in the back 50 to 100 times, more than that probably. However, this is different. And so Mobius essentially is going to give him an opportunity to explain the whole situation. Basically, it doesn't go very well, so he puts him in a time. It's very similar to Doctor Strange with Dormammu. He puts him in this time portal that essentially just keeps time looping. And it's like one of your worst moments. And so it's not like horrible. Like it's not like hell where you're like eternal flames, like you're burning forever. But essentially, and we learned with, Dormammu, how he just kept killing Doctor Strange. And the fact that he kept coming back to life was like, driving him insane. That's what they were doing with Loki. So that we get a cameo from Lady Sif, who we haven't seen in a minute now. She shows up. This is about Loki in some facet or another, cutting her hair, thinking it's funny. And so he relives that same warped thing over and over and over again on a loop. That's his prison, essentially. We go to Sylvie, and what we find with Sylvie is that B15, I might have pronounced her name wrong, but I think it's B15. B15 is the one, the lady that was in Rock's cart. She actually controlled her mind. Now, as we know, like Sylvie doesn't just implant things in people's minds. She takes whatever they have left and she uses that to take over. So while she was taking over B15's mind, B15 realized that she saw something. She had a life that was before the TVA and everything is a lie. She's starting to have that kind of, uncontrolled, she's having that feeling. And this also stems from the fact that Loki told Mobius straight up before he went into this portal, this time loop, he told him straight up that everybody at the TVA was variants. They were variants, they had a life, and the TVA erased it, and now they work for them for eternity. So you hear that, he said that loud, Mobius doesn't want to believe it, and B15 is outside of the room and hears that. So B15 takes Sylvie, has them go back to Rock's cart so they can have a separate, time. No one's bothering them, all of that. And she has Sylvie put up her memories again. And there it is. Sure enough, B15 has realized that the TVA is a fraud and they are basically all variants and they're erasing their previous lives. So it's really unfortunate in that sense. It's kind of sad, but it's a good thing because now B15 realizes this. Now, what goes on is, Loki's going to get out of this time portal eventually, but what we're going to see here is they're going to close this case on Loki. Ravona Renslayer is in her quarters, and she invites Mobius to have a drink with her. And essentially what ends up happening is that Mobius is still, he's thinking about it. Something's not adding up. He even says something doesn't feel right or something's not adding up to Ravona. Now, at this point, the viewer, as in us, don't really know what Ravona is. Is she good? Is she bad? Is there a twist here? If you're going by comics, she's Kang the Conqueror's lover. So that's something to keep in mind moving forward, but we don't know. So at this point, he actually, he has a drink. He talks to her a little bit. He, plays off that at this point you really don't know what Mobius is thinking, but you kind of feel like he's suspecting things and that he could go against the TVA. At least that's what I felt all along. I felt like he was always going to be that way. So sure enough, he gets a distraction off. He tells her about the trophy that she had, which is a sword. And essentially what ends up happening is that Ravona is hanging up her sword on her table, or her trophy case, or what have you. And he just switches the temp pads. He has a temp pad, she has a temp pad. Well, the thing with these temp pads is that they have this technology we just don't really know too much about. But the crazy thing is that it can record, it can teleport, all of that. So he had the recordings of Ravona. Keep in mind, the beginning of this, C20, he's talking about that. He's, concerned. He doesn't feel like that is totally okay and everything. Something's off. And now all of a sudden, with the Loki, coming out and telling Mobius that he's a variant, he's starting to suspect. He's starting to really not buy into this. So he goes in the library, he pulls up her temp pad, he looks and sees none other than a interrogation video with C20. And C20 is not losing her mind. C20 is entirely in control of herself, and she is in the understanding that she is a variant. She keeps saying we're all variants. She tells them everything. And you do see Ravona in that same video on her temp pad stopping it. She stops the video, and of course, as we know, she's killed off screen, C20. And with that, the glow stick, the TVA glow stick. Anyway, so this is all crazy. And this is, a lot of this is stuff that you and I have probably realized that were going to happen or thought of. It just, it's kind of shocking to see that revelation come to life on the screen. So keep this all in mind is now, you have Sylvie back in her, room that she's stuck in. You have Loki who's stuck in his, his time loop, where Sylvie's continuously beating the crap out of him. And then all of a sudden, now you have Mobius who understands that Loki was right. So Mobius is going to go back to Loki's time loop prison. He's going to open that up with her temp pad. Now, he switched the temp pad, so she has his. And she was already Ravona was already a little suspecting of Mobius the way he was talking about certain things. And then on top of that, he goes to the time loop with Loki. He tells him basically, he talks to him. He's like, so do you love her? Do you feel anything for her? Basically, like, he believes after all that the Nexus event was the two Lokis coming together, that they can bring down, if that small amount of a spark almost took out that entire timeline and it spiked that much, he feels the two Lokis coming together will bring down the entire TVA. And now he's pissed because he feels the TVA is a bunch of frauds, which they are, and they betrayed him. So he's trying, to devise a plan with Loki. They devise a plan. Now, immediately after they come out of the loop, you do see Ravona and her Minutemen ready to arrest Loki and prune, as they call it, Mobius, which ends up happening. But before she asks, before they do that, Mobius answers a question that Ravona asked him at her quarters. Where would you want to go in the time? Basically, he says, I want to know what my life was. I want to go back, and see what I used to be. And they prune him. Now, this is really upsetting. Obviously, it's sad because Owen Wilson did an amazing job, and you hate to see his character killed off. But there's more to it. One. And two, on top of this, you have to keep this in mind, is that Mobius was inside that time loop. We saw what they wanted us to see. But I'm not entirely certain that Loki, the god of mischief, was going to allow Mobius to come out of this time loop knowing that he stole this temp pad, waltz right out and into the TVA, knowing that they were going to get caught. I'm not convinced. I think there's more of a plan in place. They hatched a plan, and while you see him get, pruned, so to speak, he might actually be there. It might be like one of those image things that Loki does. So I'm not entirely convinced he got pruned. So we move on. Loki gets kidnapped. Well, he gets taken away. We have Loki and Sylvie about to meet the Timekeepers. They are going to be executed, so to speak, in front of the Timekeepers. Keep in mind what I said at the beginning with the Timekeepers. Timekeepers end up being, it's all a facade, which we all really expected, I'm pretty sure. No one really thought the Timekeepers were real. We get to see them, but they're entirely animatronic androids. And so, go figure, Ravona's there, and also B-15, before they're about to be killed or pruned or whatever, B-15 comes in because she has already, you know, completely cut off allegiance with the TVA. She comes in, makes it a fight scene. It's a fun fight scene. You get to see Sylvie getting the best of a lot of them, including Ravona, B-15, and then, of course, Loki. Now, what ends up happening is Loki's going to tell Sylvie how he feels about her, and before he does, and explain how they have a chance to take down the TVA with their love, essentially, he gets pruned behind the back, kind of stabbed through the heart, in a sense, by Ravona Renslayer, and that's how we find out she's actually bad. She's not good. There's no twist here. She is bad, and most likely all of this is going to come down to one thing. I think all of this is about Kang the Conqueror. I think it's all about him. He's from the future. To me, I think a lot of this comes down to the quantum realm. That's why Quantum Mania is going to happen. I think he might be a part of Multiverse of Madness. Jonathan Majors was casted as him. So we will see in that regard. But that's how that ends. That's how the episode ends. And it's pretty crazy, right? Pretty crazy. But it also ends with Sylvie getting the glow stick from Ravona and asking her to tell her everything. So we're going to get that as well in episode 5. But Loki's not dead. And we don't know what happened with Mobius, but likely what happened with Loki. It looks like there's this planet called Limbo in the comics. I didn't look too much into it research-wise, because I want to get this video out for you immediately after I watched it. Limbo essentially is where everyone goes that I believe is pruned. That word is so weird. And so Loki, in the mid-credit scene, sees 4 other Lokis of him. One as an alligator, one as a kid, one as a black variation of Loki who looks more like Thor, and the other one is an older version of Loki who we actually knew was cast early on in the process. So it's going to be interesting. And based on a lot of things, you look at, for instance, just the connection with Kang and the Sphinx, you know, the pyramids, like, you know, you look at all that connection, and then that recent screenshot that was supposedly leaked from episode 4, that wasn't in episode 4, it's likely in 5 or 6, with Mobius driving. There's a connection there to Kang, because Kang the Conqueror was, you know, he was part of that. On top of that, there's also more connections to Kang, because, you know, we talked about Ravona being the lover of his. On top of that, Kang, this is part of time travel, and Kang is like the king of time travel. So Kang is going to be a part of this in some fashion. I don't know if we'll see Jonathan Majors. Another theory I have is that maybe there's a head Loki of all the variants that is actually doing this. I don't know for sure, but that's what I'm suspecting. This episode was by far the best. I would give it a 9.8 out of 10. It was phenomenal. Things came together very well. The storytelling was great. I'm excited for 5 and 6. I'll talk more in depth probably on a stream or something like that. We'll get more into discussion realm. Maybe do another video because, you know, I don't want this to be too long. But, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed. This was a great episode. I'm so stoked for 5 and 6. If you guys like this, be sure to subscribe, drop a comment. Let's discuss this, and hit that like button. Appreciate you guys. Until next time, I'm Jake Ellenbogen. You guys take care.